When people want to run for office, I say, know your why. This is not for the faint of heart, right, Governor? You can become, shall we say, criticized one thing or another. It doesn't matter if you know your why. My why was the 1 in 5 children who goes to sleep at night hungry in America, who lives in poverty in America, and that's what took me from housewife to House member to House Speaker.
Hello, Cambridge. Tonight, Speaker Pelosi will be discussing her biography, The Art of Power, My Story as America's First Woman Speaker of the House, where she describes, for the first time, what it takes to make history. For lovers of politics, this book will be catnip. For those of us awed by her political prowess, it is confirmation that no modern figure has practiced the art of power so effectively. Joining Speaker Pelosi on stage tonight is Governor Maura Healey, the 73rd Governor of Massachusetts, and the first woman. Now please join me in welcoming Speaker Pelosi and Governor Healey.
Hi, guys. Look up there. A full house.
How about it?
How about it?
You filled the house. And it's not surprising. You know, Massachusetts, we brag about a lot of things. The place where this whole country was born and the like, with the shots ringing out. We've also been a place from whence a few speakers came. But as you can tell from the introduction, not only are you the greatest Speaker of the House that America has ever seen, you're the greatest Speaker of the House that Massachusetts has ever seen.
Well, thank you, Governor, and Cassie, thank you for bringing us together here and your kind introduction. It's wonderful to be in this beautiful, historic place. It's an honor to be with all of you, of course. It's an honor. Yeah, okay.
Thank you for saying that.
Don't, you guys, pay attention to me. I'm from San Francisco, I'm used to this. I want to be sure that you all hear me say what an honor it is to be with your governor.
Thank you for saying that.
She has been a champion for so many issues of concern to America's and Massachusetts working families. So thank you, Governor, for your leadership, but for honoring us with your presence here this evening.
Thank you for that, and I can say most assuredly, I would not be governor today, nor would I have been attorney general, were it not for a trailblazer like yourself. So back to the question. The legislation you've furthered, the lives you've changed, your ability to get people in powerful positions to do things, sometimes to change their mind. Interestingly enough, you called this book The Art of Power. And in thinking about your transformational work, I'm wondering if you wanted to say a little something about what led you to title the book this way, and what is your secret if it is indeed an art, you're the greatest artist of all time, what's your secret?
Well, I debated whether I would call it the science of power or the art of power, and determined that it should be art of power, because I like the reverse of it. The art of power, the power of art. I believe that in our country, the arts are what are going to bring us together. The arts have great power. When we laugh together, we cry together, we're inspired together, whether it's at a play, a symphony, a painting, or whatever, we find our common ground that we might not ever think we had anything in common with some people, but we find that we do. So again, as we go forward with the art of power, it's about bringing people together. This election is a very important election. Governor, you mentioned the history of the area where you said our country began, our democracy. At the beginning of our country, well, it was even before our country began, at the time of the revolutionaries, Thomas Paine said, "The times have found us. The times have found us, found them to declare independence, to write the most beautiful document ever written, the Declaration of Independence, to declare war on the greatest naval power that existed at the time and win, and then write the Constitution, which was a compromise, and so but our founders, in their vision for our country, had the wisdom to make it amendable, so that over time we would ever have expanding freedoms, the abolition of slavery, and black men having the right to vote, women having the right to vote, Roe v. Wade, all of those kinds of things, always expanding power. In the course of that, though, there was a challenge about the slavery issue, and the Times found Abraham Lincoln to know his power and to found him to do what he had to do to keep our country together. Now, the Times have found us to honor the vision of our founders and what they had in mind for this great country, the sacrifice of our men and women in uniform for protecting the freedoms that they established, and to be responsible for the aspirations of our children. So power has to be about finding the common ground to get that done, with the votes to get that done, and building consensus. And in my view, it comes down to a word of respect. Respect for differences of opinion, but also finding what your purpose is. When people want to run for office, I say, know your why. This is not for the faint of heart, right, Governor? You can become, shall we say, criticize one thing or another. It doesn't matter if you know your why. My why was the 1 in 5 children who goes to sleep at night hungry in America, who lives in poverty in America, and that's what took me from housewife to House member to House Speaker. So the power is in the idea, in the purpose, in the consensus that you build. And if you ask specifically about certain bills, we can talk about that if you wish.
Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. You know, you mentioned going from as housewife and mother and what have you to elected office. And one of the things that I think is so interesting, and we look to you as a woman in leadership, this iconic woman in leadership who blazed a trail. You also, though, represent someone who entered politics later in life, so to speak. You had 5 children at that, so you knew how to wrangle people. That prepared you a little bit for politics. But, you know, can you talk a little bit about that and any advice you would give to women or others out there about running?
I'd love to, because when I went to Congress, there were 435 members, 23 women. You must be kidding, right? So 12 Democrats, 11 Republicans. As a former chair of the California Democratic Party then, I said, we have to change this. We now in this Congress had 94 women. We went from 13 to 94. We still want more. They went from 11 to like 30 something. So I'm sure they won't, I don't know, I can't speak for them. But here's what I say because I have 5 children in 6 years and 7 days, which I keep reminding my Archbishop who excommunicated me. But anyway, the thing is that I was like 46 when I ran the first time, and people think that's late in life. No, I guess. But and so as I say to young people, you know, just fresh out of school or something, or moms who've raised their families or in the midst of moving their families on, you're needed. Know your power. Being a mom's a gold star. That's one of the most difficult, challenging jobs there is. So understand that we need the benefit of women's thinking. Gentlemen, no offense to you, not instead of you, but along there at the table, we need that diversity of opinion. I'll tell you this one story. When I first got into the leadership, see, I never intended to run for Congress or anything. I was a shy person. I really was. I liked being the chair of the party, to rule from behind the scenes and fight for the
I
candidate.
think a lot of people
and
have
the-
trouble
Yeah.
hearing that, though. There's a great picture. Was this your first run? And I'm not meaning to interrupt you, except to say there's an incredible picture when your first campaign for Congress in 1987, Nancy Pelosi, a voice that will be heard. People had no idea. Okay.
Okay. So
You were shy.
And so I was shy. So people came to me and said, you should run. And I only tell you this story because I want you to take something from it for yourselves. Because here's the thing. They asked me to run. I had no ambition to run. I didn't want to be center stage. I like being behind the scenes. So I go to my daughter. I had the 4 children were already in college, so they're very close. One was going into senior year in high school. She was 16, young for her class. So I said, Alexandra, mommy has been asked to run for Congress. I don't know if I will win, but they're asking me to run, and they keep asking that they want an answer and this or that. They think I'm the one who can win and da. And, but I love my life, and I'm going to leave it up to you. You have 1 more year at home. It would be better if this were a year later, but this being now. So you have it's up to you, yes or no. Any answer is fine. To which Alexandra says, Mother, now mommy, and I'm saying mommy, Mother, get a life. This was a long time ago. I had never heard that expression before. Now, after that, it became like, but I had never heard it before. And I had said to her, I said, this would involve me going like 3 nights a week, 4 days, 3 nights a week, if I were to win. I don't even know if I win. Mother, get a life. What teenage girl doesn't want her mother out of the house 3 nights a week? Yeah. So I got a life. But in any event, I knew my why. I didn't feel the ambition to be a congressman, but I knew my why. And I'd say that to all of you. If you're just be ready, know your why, and be yourself. Now, there may be people that you admire, like your wonderful governor and this or that, but I'm sure she'd be the first to say, be yourself. That's authenticity, that sincerity is what people respect and respond to. So again, to those who may be thinking about it, know how important you are. And actually, to every person here, whether it's women, men, students, or people coming out of the kitchen to go to Congress, there's nobody in the history of the world like you. In the history of the world, you have that uniqueness, that authenticity, again, that word. So, and take inventory of your upbringing, the environment you lived in, the education you received, the work you may have done, whatever it is. And that is very important, because when people see you, know your why, be yourself, and be ready to take it on, they'll know that there's somebody who might have shared experience with me who's speaking for me at that table. So again, I believe that, say to the women especially, this is not for the faint of heart, as I said, but nothing is more wholesome to the political process and the governmental process than more participation and leadership of women and minorities and new people coming into the mix. And when we always say, when women succeed, America succeeds. So that's what I wanted women especially to know, but also not just women, everyone to know, be confident about who you are. Know the power of you. So when people want to run, I say, you get into the arena now, we're talking about not being a spectator. And I will quote a Republican president, let the record show. President Teddy Roosevelt, he gave the arena speech. He gave it actually at the Sorbonne in Paris, but it's a great speech. You should all read it if you haven't. And he talks, when you're in the arena, you're no longer a spectator. So I say to these candidates when they come forward, we recruit them or they self-recruit or whatever, when you're in the arena, again, tough arena, you have to be ready to take a punch. You have to be ready to throw a punch for the children. For the children. So that was my motivation, for the children. And that made me get over a little of my bashfulness.
Well, you know, you got there and then some. 2007, you're elected America's first woman to be Speaker of the House and breaking a glass ceiling. Can you say a little bit more about this? We have an election in 2 weeks, and gender is a discussion in the election. What do you feel it means to be a woman in power? And talk a little bit about, you mentioned, and I'm so glad, when women succeed, America succeeds. And we know that too from looking at corporations and boards. Boards with greater diversity have a better bottom line. I think the same is true when it comes to policies and outcomes. Can you talk a little bit about that, and also the extent to which, while there are pictures in this book of you being the only woman in the room, how has that been an asset?
Well, I will answer that question, if you will answer that question after, because we have a lot to learn from you, Governor, because it is, again, to be the governor of this great state, quite a remarkable thing. You know, people have said I'm the most significant, I don't know if that's really the word, but that's what they say, women in politics in our country's history. In 12 days, that will no longer be true. And I say that not because Kamala Harris is a woman. I say that because she is the best person for the job. Right, Marjorie? Who happens to be a woman. You know, in other words, when I ran for Speaker, this might tell you something about, but it's not a glass ceiling, Governor, in the Congress. It's a marble ceiling. It's really, and so when I first ran, again, I didn't want to run for leadership, but people came to me and said, well, you have to run, you know how to win elections. So I decided to run when we were losing. We lost 94, 96, 98, it was coming to 2000, and I was like, I'm tired of losing, so if I'm going to do this, I want to have some, shall we say, power that goes with it. So anyway, so people started encouraging me to run more publicly, so I said I'd be open to it. And the guy said, you know, we have a pecking order here where people have been waiting to run for jobs when there's an opening, and we have a pecking order for a long time, and you're breaking into the line. I said, exactly. We've been waiting, and they've been waiting a while to run for this office. One office came available. And I said, well, we've been waiting over 200 years. And then when I ran, they said, now this is in this century. I'm not talking about a long time ago. In this century, 2000 early. They said, first thing they said was, who said she could run? Oh, why don't you light my fire? You think I need your permission to run? And then it was, well, you think there should be a woman? Why don't the women just write down what they want and then we'll do it for you? Poor babies. So anyway, I said, I don't want you voting for me because I'm a woman, and I don't want you voting against me because I'm a woman. I just want you to listen to what I have to say about the policy and the politics that will take us to victory, which is how I became Speaker, because we got to victory. But it was even in this century, so who said she could run? Oh my gosh. So in any case, this isn't a glass ceiling. again, it's a marble ceiling. And it's what is out there right now that has to be recognized, contended with, and I feel very confident that we will prevail, because I always thought the American people were much more ready for a woman president than the Congress was ready for a woman speaker in light of the, shall we say, marble ceiling. Well, how about you? How do you see it, Governor?
Well, I appreciate all those comments. You know, I had a group of Girl Scouts in today to the office, and I love when children come in, especially young girls. And I can tell in talking to them that just who I am might mean something, that they see something, that they maybe can be something. They don't have to be governor, they can be whatever they want. But the point is, you know, to be it, you have to see it, and we're so grateful to you for leading the way. And I think all of us in office, women, and I spend a lot of time with my women governors, try to model that and to be the example. Now, it's still the case. I may be traveling in different parts of the country. It doesn't happen here, but where I come through an airport, I get out of the car, I'm going into a hotel, and a person there greeting will often approach a member of my state police executive protection and address them as governor. And they're just the best team, and they will, you know, say, no, this is the governor. But you know how that experience going through airports, how that can happen. So, you know, there is a certain lens out there, but I think we change it by electing more women, and that's something I'm very, very focused on with Democratic governors in particular. The other thing in my experience is we have better policies. Remember that picture years ago when the men took away, they wanted to take away all the contraception coverage. Right? There were no men at that table. Yeah. So we have better policies, and with better policies and laws, we have better outcomes when women are at the table and represented, with people of color at the table and represented. And I will stop with that, except I'll plug our state. We're now #1 for education, access to health care, best place to have a baby, best place to raise a family, best place to live if you're a woman. I'm really proud of what we've been able to do. So, okay. So, let's get back to your legislative record. Affordable Care Act. You know, I don't know if folks remember this, but in your book, you talk about the Affordable Care Act, and you talk about it not just in terms of the physical health of Americans, but their moral wellness. Their moral wellness. I'm just wondering what you meant by that, and where do you think we stand now as a nation in terms of our moral wellness?
Well, the Affordable Care Act is, for me, and people always ask, what is your most important legislative achievement? And I would say it is the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. Martin Luther King said of all of the inequalities, the most inhuman, he used the word inhuman, was that of inequality for access to health care, because people could die. For 100 years, I'm always going back, I'm not going back to 200, to Thomas Paine, or 300, 250 almost. For 100 years, presidents have tried to have Affordable Care Act, starting with our friend Teddy Roosevelt, a Republican. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. So when we had this opportunity with President Obama, who was totally committed to it, and we had our different versions floating around during the Clinton years and this or that, we knew in the House and the Congress that we had to write the bill. That would be different from what others said. Here's what we developed our consensus, and we developed the bill. It was hard. I said to the president the first time we met on the subject, President Obama, I know this territory because we've worked it in increments over time. It's going to be like take no prisoners, carpet bombing, the worst kind of battle that we can be in, from the insurance industry, from the pharmaceutical industry, from the non-governmental industry, people who don't believe in governance. And it's going to be rough out there, and it was. But we will not let anything stand in the way. So, so Massachusetts has a role in what I have to say now. So anyway, we had the great minds of the Congress put together this legislation, House and Senate. We have our difficulties with the Senate because, you know, it's in the book, but nonetheless, we had, for example, a public option in the House that couldn't have it in the Senate. So we, again, had some major disagreements, but nonetheless, we come up with a bill, and it was hard, but it was about respect, listening, generational, gender ID, geography, regional differences, and how healthcare is regarded, and how it is implemented all over the country, every different kind of ethnicity, and again, making sure we had equality, that people had access, and recognizing the challenge for some that had been previously out of the loop to incorporate them in the loop. So we move along with it, and it's complicated, so I won't go into complex, but we move along with it, and you need 60 votes in the Senate. We had 60 votes, Democrats in the Senate. And then, you know this better than anyone, Senator Kennedy passed away. It was such a tragedy for so many reasons, but he was also our 60th vote, and he would not mind me saying it that way. So the press, and then a Republican was elected to the Senate. So the press said to me, this is you're dead. I mean, you have 59 votes, you don't have 60 votes, and so I guess this is over for you. And I said, no, this is an opportunity of a generation, and we will not let it pass. We will prevail, and we're not letting anything stand in our way. If there's an obstacle there, we'll push open the gate. If that doesn't work, we'll climb the fence. If that doesn't work, we'll pole vault in. If that doesn't work, we'll parachute in. But we're not letting anything stand in the way of the Affordable Care Act. So after one thing and another, you know, we after it was over and we passed the bill, they came to me again and say, which one did you do? And I said, no, we just pushed open the gate. We just pushed open the gate because we had the courage of our members, their commitment. They all read it. We read it together. It was, they knew what they were voting for, and they were very courageous, pushing open that gate. But we were not alone. And this is the point I want to make with you. The outside mobilization made it possible. Anything we want to do in Congress and the rest, our inside maneuvering is essential, but it is not necessarily successful. The outside mobilization, the people speaking out about it. So we had the patient groups, we had all these other pre-existing conditioned folks, all of them helping us push open that gate. Thank heavens, thank God, here we are in church, we had the nuns, because we didn't have the bishops. We had the nuns, and the nuns were very important. They were the head of the Catholic Hospital Association, this, that, and the other thing, and they were there with us. One story that seems to be, I don't want to say notorious, but that people talk about is when we were about to take the vote, and this, I mean, we were up until like 3 o'clock on Friday night resolving regional differences. Most people didn't know that that was the biggest obstacle to passing the bill. And so at 3 o'clock on Friday, I wanted to bring the bill up on Sunday. I knew I'd have the votes, but I wanted more. So I thought of this one member from Indiana who was very pro-life. I respect that. But our pro-life members were supporting the bill because they knew it did not violate that principle for them. There was nothing in the bill, regardless of what the bishops were saying. I say that as a devout Catholic, but regardless of what the bishops were saying, the bishops were trying to undo Roe v. Wade even in the bill. But we had no funding for abortion or anything like that in the bill. And some of our most serious pro-life people knew that and were supporting the bill. So I said, to say to him, I felt I could go to him since pro-life members were supporting the bill. And I thought, what's the best way to speak to him? So I called, he represented South Bend, Indiana in the Congress, Notre Dame. I called Father Hesburgh. Father Hesburgh was one of the great leaders of our country. He marched with Martin Luther King. He was a great civil rights leader. It was fabulous theologian, just the greatest. He was the president, had been the president of Notre Dame. So I had visited him there many times. So I called him and said, Father Hesburgh, how can I help? I said, well, here's the thing. The bishops, contrary to what the bishops are saying, we do not have any objectionable language in the legislation. Well, how can I help? I said, well, you can call Joe Donnelly, who was the congressman there, Joe Donnelly, and ask him to vote for the bill. That's his number. So he asked Joe Donnelly and said, Congressman, Speaker Pelosi and I need you to vote for the Affordable Care Act. So he did. And then, but I thought I'd keep it a secret that he just made up his mind, until I walk into the cloakroom and I hear them comparing. You should see how she got me. You should see what she did to me. And I hear him saying, she practically had the Pope calling me. She had Now, speaking of Pope, Joe Donnelly is now the ambassador to the Holy See. Since Congress, he served as in the United States Senate. And he's a beautiful, lovely person who voted for the Affordable Care Act, and again, now represents us in Rome as the ambassador to the Holy See. But that's the kind of thing you have just to make sure people know it's not what somebody else says it is. It is what it is, and we recognize what the challenges are that you may have. And that's not what the bill was supposed to be about. It was about not only adding tens of millions of people to get affordable care, but 150 million families who had somebody with a pre-existing condition, but were discriminated against in the healthcare system. About being a woman was no longer a pre-existing medical condition. It cost more if you were a woman. That your child could stay on the program until 26 years old to go to graduate school or start a business or just have a job that they loved but didn't maybe have health care. And so it had so many things, but the most important thing was the pre-existing condition discrimination that we did away with. And those were the people who were at the gate mostly helping us pass the bill. So then, of course, they came in, and what's his name who's running now, he said, I hate to say this in church, but I'm only quoting somebody who wants to be president of the United States. Obamacare sucks. That's his language. He's so vulgar, but that's what he said. And we said, no, it doesn't. It cures. It cures. And so the outside mobilization, again, tens of thousands of events where people told their stories. And I tell you this in some length because this is about the people speaking. And of course, New England is famous for that, the people weighing in. Another Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, he said, public sentiment is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost anything. Without it, practically nothing. But for public sentiment to weigh in, people have to know. So that's why that outside mobilization of messaging is so important. And we just, in other words, unless you recognize that, whether you're trying to elect somebody or pass a bill, the outside mobilization rules.
Wow. There was so much in that I'm sure we'd love to hear more about. I actually met Ambassador Donnelly earlier this year. I was invited to the Vatican by Pope Francis for a climate summit, and we went to the ambassador's residence. And lo and behold, he told me that story. It still is with him. So I have to ask, because that doesn't just happen, and your ability to sort of, in the most beautiful and loving and always for the children way possible, to size people up, to understand what needed to be moved to get and who needed to be called, like, where does that come from? It's Baltimore, D'Alessandro, like, where does that come from? How do you develop or nurture such or can you? Or that you're just born with that?
Well, it starts with your why. What is your purpose? And that, again, is your North Star. But it also is about respect. What are you thinking? What are people thinking, and how do we together reach our North Star? But it also helps to know how to count votes. count votes. So I don't know. One of the things that I had advantage with my members was I loved being a legislator. Just as people said, when you go there and you're working on the policy, you're really going to love it because that's what motivates you to be in politics. And I loved being a legislator. So I wasn't interested in any other job. People would say, well, why don't you run for this or that? And I loved the job that I had. And I wasn't interested in any appointment. So they knew when I was asking them about their opinion or trying to persuade them to mine, that it wasn't with another agenda. It was about the purpose of the bill, the purpose of the bill.
Speaking of people who love their job, we're graced tonight to be with Congressman Barney Frank. He's here tonight. Yeah.
Barney's like a brother to me. I love him so much, and we all learned so much from him and his shy and bashful way.
Well, he is the best, and I was the first gay person elected, openly gay, elected AG, and the first gay woman elected governor in the country, and I am so grateful to Barney Frank for all he's done in blazing so many trails. He also... And I asked him to come see me just a few months ago. We had a great afternoon in my office, and we're going to do that again because we still got a lot of problems to solve. So wonderful to see you here.
But since Barney's here, can I tell you another story about
how
show.
Yeah. Is it about Barney?
Barney will correct me as we go along. I know. So we have this opportunity now to end Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Barney and I never voted for that to begin with, but now years later, we have a chance with President Obama in the White House and his support on this. Now, then we find out you can't do it without legislation. So we work very hard. Well, let me just put this way. Barney worked so hard on so many things, whether it was the hate crimes legislation. We had a bill that we were going to have hate crimes, and it was going to be fully inclusive. And it was going to be LGBTQ, fully inclusive. But we couldn't get certain things out of committee here and there. And people came to me and said, you could do this in a minute if you took out trans. Now this is 2009, like that, 8 or 9, something. I said, no, we won't do it in 100 years if we take out trans, because we'll never bring it up without trans. Barney, it was like 7 or 8, it was early. Barney told his personal story, and he and Matthew Shepard's mother talked to the members, and we were able to get the fully inclusive, including trans, into the legislation. So we had a series of things, the hate crimes bill, and then the next thing was supposed to be ending discrimination in the workplace. But everybody, the outside said, we want to end Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So that became our next bill. So we finally get the votes, because not every Democrat, we have diversity in our caucus at that time, more diversity than now actually in terms of opinion then. So we get the number of votes we're going to need. The bill comes up on the floor. It's the Defense Authorization Bill. This is the defense bill for the country. So we have the amendment to end Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We passed the amendment. Oh my God, it was so fabulous. It was so transformative. We were so excited. So I went over to the progressives, which I consider myself one of, but I went over to the progressives and I said, we've made history today. Yes, and you're going to make it twice. And why is that? Because for the first time, you're going to vote for a defense bill. Right, Barney? So they said, oh no, never. Don't ask us to do that. We have awards in our office, 100% of record of never voting for a defense bill. I said, well, you know what? If you don't have an amendment, if you don't have a bill, we have to pass the bill. No, absolutely not. Why do you say that? The Republicans always vote for the defense bill. That's why they come here. Give tax cuts to the rich and vote for the defense bill. I said, you know what? Give me a break. I know what I'm doing here, okay? Well, what makes you think? I said, well, I see it in their eyes. I read lips. I know what's happening here, okay? So I said, well, if you just do me this one favor, stay in the back and don't vote until you see what they do. We take up the bill. 9 Republicans voted for the bill. What would you say, like 180 some voted against the bill because it had that provision in it. So here they come down the aisle. Barney Frank, of course. Barney was never a problem. John Lewis, Anna Eshoo, Barbara Lee, Dennis Kucinich, you name them. Maxine Waters, all the liberals coming down the aisle, voting for the first time, making history in their lives to vote for the defense bill. That didn't end it. Barney had to work the Senate, and he worked a miracle with Harry Reid to make sure that it would pass in the Senate. But it was very funny to see these folks who were never going to vote for a defense bill. Don't ever make me do that again. Well. Thank you, Barney Frank.
I want to move now to...
Before you do, let me just tell you one more thing. Because there's a similar mathematics here. Right after Dobbs, where freedom was constrained in our country for the first time in our history, we put the Roe v. Wade on the floor to be enshrined as law of the land. Not one Republican voted for it. Okay, that's what they believe, that's that. So then I put it on the floor. I only say this because it matches this bill. I put it on the floor. I say to the members, we're going to have bill on the floor. Kathy Manning of North Carolina's bill that says women have a right to contraception. Women have a right to contraception. The members said, why are you doing that? They'll vote for it. You'll make them well. They'll look like they, You know what I'm saying? I know what I'm doing, okay? So we put the bill on the floor. 203 Republicans voted. 8 of them voted for women to have the right to contraception. 8. 195 of them voted that women would not have the right to contraception. That's where we are today in this Congress and in this character of the country that they're trying to change with their religious nationalism and the rest of that. 8. You think, do they need a lesson in the birds and the bees? Do they know what's going on in their own household? 8 Republicans, did I have 9 up there? 8 Republicans voted for it. 195 no.
Amazing.
So it's a similar vote, so I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Well, let's move to a minute for January 6th, because I know people do want to have an opportunity to hear from you. We've now seen more of the footage. We've watched you literally on that day, and how you were able to just so intensely be focused on a job at hand and getting back to the Capitol that evening, taking the vote. Can you just share a little bit about that with us tonight?
Thank you, Governor, for asking about that, because it really was something so historic, so terrible, and so now misrepresented by revisionist history as a day of love by what's his name? A day of love. Here, the President of the United States incited an insurrection on the Capitol of the United States, the temple of freedom to the world, of democracy to the world, an assault on the Congress of the United States as it was to honor its responsibility to accept the votes of the Electoral College. Constitution, Congress, Capitol, horrible, violent, coming to the Capitol in a way you see the films, it's a horrible thing. Defecating on the floor, I mean, violently.
In your office,
All
so
of, well,
violent, you know.
And it was terrible. But physical violence is one thing. The trauma that that incurred because of it on the members, on the staff, on the press, that was on anybody who happened to be there. It was horrible. When the president then, what's his name, was told that the vice president was under threat, he said, so what? So what? The vice president of the United States is under threat. So what? They were after him with a noose for a gallows. They were after me to shoot me in my brain with F words attached to all of that. But I had a lot of security, and so did the vice president. What I was concerned more about were the other members and the staff and the rest. It was hard. Over 100 police, law enforcement were injured. Some died from the injuries, and the president would not send the National Guard, even though we had even Mitch McConnell begging him to do so with us in a bipartisan way, Chuck and I and Mitch McConnell. And he just wouldn't send it. And now he goes out saying, I'll offer them the national. If his lips are moving, you know what he's doing. Okay. But this was horrible. But then they said to me, well, you know what? Even when he did finally send the National Guard in the evening, they said to me, you'll probably have to wait a day or so and go to the undisclosed location and have the members come there and vote for the Electoral College. I said, no. That is not going to happen. Tonight, we are going to the floor, and we will show the people of America and the world that we are on the floor of the House, that we have prevailed and they have failed, and that we will proceed. Yeah. But what was really sad about it, and Barney and I have talked about this, what is really sad about it, Governor, was even after all of that, overwhelmingly the Republicans, led by their leadership, voted against accepting the results of the Electoral College. Even though all of the documentation, all the court cases, everything, largely from Republican officials in those states that they were challenging, had validated the Electoral College. So this was something, but I will never forgive them for a lot of things, including the trauma that they caused. My own staff, under tables, behind locked doors, with furniture pushed up, 4 hours not being able to talk, in the dark, scared to death. But that was what I saw. Personally, it was universal. Even the members, it took them almost a year to tell their story about what happened that day. This year, it's absolutely essential that Hakeem Jeffries is Speaker of the House. Absolutely essential. As did I, but let's go forward. He must have that gavel. He must have that gavel to maintain the decorum, what the Capitol is about, what Congress is about, but more importantly, that we have the votes to accept the results of the college. And of course, that day, our new president-to-be will still be vice president, so she will preside from the Senate side because that's before the inauguration. So we have that covered, but we have to make sure that Hakeem is the power of the speaker is awesome, and especially, now we need him for everything else, for following your lead on the child tax credit and all the things the governor has done. For all the issues, we need him there, our values and the rest, but for our democracy, January 6th. Now,
and how do we get there? Because people, I think, are interested in how we get there as we're 13 days away. We'll be waking up to a new president.
Okay, Governor. Yeah, just let me just say one more thing about January 6th. It has been declared a special national security event, as I've told Ambassador Salmont and Susan earlier today. So we'll have security there to hopefully remove all doubt about the lack of violence. Okay, so here's the thing. Forgive me if you've heard me say this before, because I say it all the time. As a former chair of the party, we must own the ground. There are three things: the mobilization at the grassroots level to get out the vote, the messaging, which has to be bold but not menacing, that we can be unifying and inviting in our message. And I say that as a San Francisco liberal. When I was in Michigan at your governor's invitation there, I said, what works in Michigan works in San Francisco. What works in San Francisco might not work in Michigan. Let's win Michigan, okay? Let's just win, baby. That's it. So the message has to be unifying, and then the money to get it done. So forget the money, the messaging the candidates are doing. The mobilization is in your hands. Everybody has to be calling, texting, sending postcards, knocking on doors. This is it. Anything else is a conversation at this point. Getting out the vote is what matters. It's there for us. If we turn out the vote, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are president and vice president of the United States. So we got the three M's: the message, the mobilization, the message to fuel the mobilization, the money to get the job done. But right now, we're just talking about owning the ground, the mobilization. I have three other things. That's three M's. I have three no's. No wasted time, no underutilized resources, and no regrets the day after the election. If only we had done one more precinct each in Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. And that's what we're about doing. That's what all of us, we're all engaged in that. We will win the House. I feel very confident. It's a fight. This is a campaign. It's a war term. It's a fight. But I feel pretty secure about our winning the House for Hakeem to be there. But we take nothing for granted. You know, this is a fight. So again, if you don't lose sleep on it, and people say, I have my fingers crossed, I said, uncross them and make some calls.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. And, you know, we're going to be wrapping shortly. We did have a couple of questions from the audience. We did have questions.
Thank you for saying we have to stop sending bombs to Israel.
Okay. So,
thank you.
So here. Okay. So here's, we're going to take some questions from the audience. One is Sylvia wrote in earlier.
Thank you. We heard you.
What would you say about your greatest accomplishment that you're most proud of? You've had so many.
I would say my most, my best accomplishment was, of course, the Affordable Care Act.
Affordable Care Act.
And it's a very specific. It's very specific in the book.
All right, another question. Kara from Needham. You know, actually, this is a good one. there's a picture.
If I just may, Governor, say this. You know what's interesting to me is that Joe Biden has been the most consequential president. I mean, he has been spectacular in so many respects. And he has been a friend of Israel, as we all have. It's in our national interest to do so, a security issue, but also in our values. But he also has been very concerned about a two-state solution for the region. And that since the early 90s, and Barney, you were there, when the government countries were brought together, we talked about a two-state solution, and Joe Biden has been for that. He has been such a strong supporter of humanitarian assistance for the people of Gaza. But even before October 7th, before September 30th, our end of the fiscal year, the member said to me, Rosa DeLauro, who's the chair of the Appropriations Committee, she said to me, can you go to the Republicans and get them to support humanitarian assistance for UNRWA? This is the agency that distributes the UNRWA. I go to them and they say, we will give you more humanitarian assistance. Now this is like September 24th. We will give you more humanitarian assistance as long as none of it goes to the Palestinians, the Republicans. And they're out there criticizing Joe Biden, and with the idea that Hamas is a terrorist organization. They are dedicated to the destruction of Israel. That is not a justification for non-combatants and children and the collateral damage of war. We have to address the subject of war. But the fact is that I say to them, one day would you say something about the hostages? No. They're just on a thing about Joe Biden, which makes me question. I know that many of them are sincere, it's organic, it's spontaneous, they're genuine, but not all of it. A lot of it has a political purpose against Joe Biden, and now they're transferring that to Kamala Harris. So again, we don't want any children. That's not who we are as a country. There has to be a resolution of conflict that is not savage as war, which is terrible, but nonetheless, why they have targeted Joe Biden. They're outside my house all the time with big signs lit, banging drums in the middle of the night as if that's a good idea in front of my house after all I've been through in my house from some people from the outside. So it's just, bless them for their enthusiasm. Barney, you and I, we've been out on the streets, we protest, we value that. That's again part of the outside mobilization part of it. But let's have some truth. Let's have some truth in what is happening about it.
Thank you. How do you keep going? You are indefatigable. You're just like, where does that come from?
So
that energy.
Energy.
You have unrelenting energy, and also, I'd have to say, to do what you do and to have the resilience, the other side of that, seems to me, is optimism. Right?
Well, very dark chocolate, right? Very dark chocolate. It's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, in one form or another, ice cream, candy, whatever. But I do think being Italian has something to do with it, too. Because I don't know. And of course, once you raise 5 children in 6 years and 7 days, you have your, shall we say, your capacity for absorbing change and all the rest is, but I don't know, maybe I do have a lot of energy. I don't have enough hours in the day to get everything done that I want to get done. Resting is rusting for me, but nonetheless, I am motivated by the children, but I am motivated to make sure a certain person comes nowhere near the White House in 12 days.
And I think we heard the charge from you tonight about what needs to happen. I think we remember in this book there's that picture of you standing up to that person in a room only men in that room but yourself, and choosing to be the one to decidedly confront him where others wouldn't. So you've given us the charge. Is there anything else you think people need to know as we leave this church tonight, and that we should be telling, that we should be relaying to people we go home to or people we're going to see tomorrow and in the days ahead?
Well, you mentioned Baltimore. I was born and raised in Baltimore, in Little Italy, in the Italian section, and it was near where the port, where the national anthem was written during the War of 1812. And the national anthem has something in it that is a motivator to me. You applaud when you had your banner yesterday with the Celtics, congratulations, and all that. But you know at a sporting event when they sing the national anthem and it's a land of the free, home of the brave, everybody cheered, hooray, hooray. But I cheer sooner than that. I cheer when it says, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Proof that our flag was still there. And that is what our challenge is now by these folks. And that flag is the flag that we, every day in our civic or academic worlds, take a pledge to the flag with liberty and justice, justice, justice for all. So that is what motivates. It's who are we as a country? What is the character of America? How is it that we can be respectful of each other under the law and with opportunity, liberty, and justice for all? So in that room, I don't know if you've seen that picture, I'm pointing to him like that. He was, I bring it, I'm glad you brought it up for this reason, because right now you see General Kelly, well, his former chief of staff, saying that he has the traits of a, what did he say, a fascist? You hear other people saying he shouldn't be president again. People who worked for him. In that room, all the things they are saying about him, he was saying about himself. He was revealing, criticizing the generals. They don't know anything. It's a good thing I'm there because I know how to do, I did this and I did that. I was like, what? What? Are you hallucinating or what? And whatever it is about Putin, I think maybe because Putin is shorter than he is or something that he likes Putin. So I stood up at that point and said, I've had it with this. I stood up and I pointed to him and I said, I'm leaving this room because with you, Mr. President, all roads lead to Putin. And you can't even have a conversation about him, about the national security of our country. And that's why all of these national security figures are rallying to Kamala Harris. Now, they're not all rallying to her, but they're rallying away from him. They cannot vote for him. Even his vice president of the United States said he's not voting for him. Dick Cheney, a vice president of the United States, and Liz Cheney, they are staunch Republicans. Bless their hearts. And the country needs a strong Republican Party. We need a strong Republican Party, not a cult. A strong Republican Party. And that's what we hope after we get past this election, that we will see rise from the ashes of the cult. But we have to win the election. But I can tell you, with all these things that these leaders, these national security leaders are saying, I heard there. I mean, Kamala says, I know people like him. I've prosecuted people like him. I know him. And since you asked, I'm just saying. I mean, I don't know if we talk politics in church, but from a civics standpoint, if we're going to give proof through the night that our flag is still there with liberty and justice for all, we have to just win, baby. Just win the election.
Ladies and gentlemen, Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Wow. Thank you.